I had been married to Emily for 10 years. We met in college, young, broke, and completely captivated by each other. She had a way of making me feel like I was the center of her world, and for the longest time, I truly believed it. We built a life together, the kind of life you see in those overly sentimental commercials. A cozy home in the suburbs, 2 kids who are the absolute joy of my life, and a dog named Max who acts like he owns a house. But recently, something changed. At first, it was subtle, like listening to a song you've heard 1,000 times, but suddenly realizing a note is missing. Emily's smile seemed forced, her laughter hollow. She started working late more often, not unusual given her demanding job, but this time it felt different. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but an uneasy feeling began to take root. The house, once filled with warmth, now echoed with an eerie silence I couldn't ignore. Even Max noticed it, often lying by the door as if waiting for something or someone who wasn't coming home. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself I was just overthinking things. After all, 10 years of marriage can make anyone feel like they're stuck in a routine. Maybe this was just a rough patch, a temporary setback in our otherwise perfect life. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. The cracks in our foundation were widening, and I could feel us slipping through them. Yet, even with that unsettling feeling growing inside me, nothing could prepare me for what was coming next. It was a Saturday afternoon, one of those rare days where we had no plans. Emily suggested we spend some time separately, which was unusual for her. She had always insisted that we spend every free moment together, whether it was watching movies on the couch or taking a leisurely walk around the neighborhood. So when she said she had errands to run and left without so much as a second glance, the whisper of doubt in my mind grew louder. Max must have sensed my unease because he followed me around the house, his eyes full of concern. I tried to distract myself by tidying up, but as I walked past our bedroom, something caught my attention, something that made my heart skip a beat. Her favorite necklace, an expensive piece I had given her on our 5th anniversary, was lying on the dresser. Emily never went anywhere without it. She always said it was her good luck charm, a symbol of us. That whisper of doubt turned into a deafening roar. Almost without thinking, I grabbed my phone and opened our phone bill, something I never usually checked. As I scrolled to the call logs, my hands started to tremble. There was a number I didn't recognize, one that appeared over and over again, sometimes late at night, other times in the middle of the day when she was supposed to be at work. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was just a friend she hadn't mentioned. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But then I noticed something else. The texts she had sent to this number were deleted from her phone, and suddenly, everything clicked into place. A sickening wave of nausea washed over me. Max whimpered softly, sensing my distress, and nudged my hand with his nose. I sank to the floor beside him, my phone slipping from my grasp. The doubt had transformed into a cold, hard certainty. Emily was hiding something that could shatter the life we had built together. By Monday, I was a wreck. Sleep had been impossible, my mind spinning through every possible scenario. I replayed the last few months, trying to pinpoint exactly when things had changed. There were too many signs I had ignored, brushed off as work stress, mood swings, or just a natural ebb and flow of a long-term relationship. That evening, Emily came home later than usual. Her makeup was slightly smudged, her hair a bit messy. She barely acknowledged me, muttering something about a long day before heading upstairs to shower. As I heard the water running, I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the reflection in the mirror across from me. A man I barely recognized stared back, eyes hollow, face pale, the weight of suspicion pressing down on him like a lead blanket. I waited until she was out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, her face flushed from the steam. "Emily," I started, my voice more fragile than I had intended. "Who is he?" For a split second, her expression faltered. It was quick. So quick that if I hadn't been watching her so closely, I would have missed it. Then she laughed. Actually laughed. As if I had just told the most ridiculous joke in the world. "What the hell are you talking about, Jake?" she said, brushing past me to grab clothes from the closet. The air between us was thick with tension, every second stretching into eternity. I couldn't tear my eyes away from her, searching for any sign of guilt, any proof that I wasn't losing my mind. I'm talking about the calls, Emily, the late nights, the distance. I'm not stupid. Something's going on, and I deserve to know the truth. She froze for just a moment, her back to me as she pulled on a shirt. I saw her shoulders tense, the slightest tremor in her hands. But when she turned around, her face was unreadable, a cold, detached mask. "You're being paranoid," she snapped. "It's just work. I'm under a lot of pressure, and you're not exactly making things easier with all your questions." There it was, the gaslighting, the classic twist of the knife that made me doubt my own sanity. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was overreacting. But something in her eyes, dark and evasive, told me I wasn't wrong. Before I could respond, she pushed past me again, heading for the door. "I'm going out for a drink," she said over her shoulder. "Maybe you should calm down before throwing around accusations." And just like that, she was gone, leaving me alone in the suffocating silence of our bedroom. Max curled up at my feet, his presence a small comfort in the storm raging inside me. I knew I had to dig deeper, find the truth she was so desperately trying to hide. Because deep down I knew this was only the beginning. The next day, I couldn't shake the image of Emily's cold, dismissive gaze. It was like she had become a stranger overnight, and that terrified me. I called in sick to work. I couldn't focus on anything else but the gnawing need to uncover what she was hiding. I decided to follow her. It felt wrong, like a betrayal of the trust we had built over a decade. But I had no choice. But I couldn't see any other way. Emily had already left for work, so I waited. The hours crawled by, each passing minute unraveling my nerves. By the time the sun began to sink beneath the horizon, I was a restless mess, pacing the living room, unable to sit still. Finally, Emily returned home, but she didn't linger. She changed into something casual, jeans and a loose sweater, then walked right past me without a word, without even a glance in my direction. My heart pounded as I grabbed my keys and followed, keeping a safe distance so she wouldn't notice. She drove into the city, weaving through the evening traffic with practiced ease. I stayed far enough behind, each turn twisting the knot of unease in my stomach tighter. I tried convincing myself that I was overreacting, that this was all some terrible misunderstanding. But then she pulled into the parking lot of a dimly lit bar, one I didn't recognize. I parked a few spaces away, watching as she stepped out of the car and disappeared inside. My hands trembled, adrenaline coursing through me. I sat there, waiting, my eyes locked on the entrance. Time stretched endlessly, doubt creeping in again. Maybe she was just meeting a friend. Maybe this had nothing to do with me. Then I saw him. A tall, well-built man emerged from the shadows, radiating an air of easy arrogance. Emily greeted him with a smile I hadn't seen in months. It was warm, familiar, intimate. My blood turned to ice as they embraced, her arms wrapping around his neck, their bodies pressing together in a way that left no room for doubt. It felt like the ground beneath me had crumbled, like my entire reality was caving in. I wanted to burst through those doors, to demand answers, but I was frozen, paralyzed by the sight of my wife in another man's arms, a man who looked at her with the same intensity that used to be mine. They lingered in each other's embrace before she took his hand and led him inside. The door swung shut behind them with a finality that echoed through my bones. I sat there, staring at that closed door, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me like a physical force. Everything made sense now, the late nights, the secretive behavior, the coldness in her eyes. Emily wasn't just cheating. This wasn't a fleeting mistake. It was something deeper, something that had been growing behind my back for far too long. A wave of nausea hit me, my world spinning as I tried to process what I had just witnessed. I couldn't stay. I couldn't keep watching them. So I drove home in a daze, my thoughts racing, trying to grasp what came next. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. When Emily finally returned that night, I was sitting at the kitchen table, a half-empty bottle of whiskey in front of me. My hands were steady now, the initial shock settling into a cold, simmering rage. Max lay at my feet, his presence a small comfort, one of the few things in my life that still felt real. She walked in, barely looking at me, her expression laced with irritation, as if I were nothing more than an inconvenience. "You're still up?" she asked, her tone casual, almost indifferent. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I studied her, absorbing every detail. The way her hair was slightly tousled, her lips a bit swollen, the faint scent of cologne that wasn't mine clinging to her clothes. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. It was as if she had already decided I wouldn't fight back. "Where were you?" I finally asked, my voice low, controlled. She rolled her eyes, tossing her purse onto counter. "Out! I told you I needed some time to myself." "To yourself?" I repeated, my grip tightening around the glass. "Is that what you call it now?" She froze for a brief moment, her eyes narrowing as she turned to face me. A flicker of something crossed her face. Panic, guilt, maybe even anger, but it vanished just as quickly. Taking a step closer, she lowered her voice to a dangerous whisper. "What exactly are you implying, Jake?" I stood, the chair scraping against the floor with a sharp, grating sound. "I followed you, Emily," I said, each word laced with quiet devastation. "I saw you with him." The silence that followed was suffocating. Her face paled, and for a moment, I thought she might try to deny it. Then, to my astonishment, she laughed, a bitter, humorless sound that echoed through the room. "You really couldn't just let it go, could you?" she scoffed, shaking her head. "You had to play detective. Had to dig into every little thing. Are you serious right now?" I shot back, my voice rising. "You've been lying to me, sneaking around behind my back, and you're blaming me for finding out?" "Lying," she sneered, crossing her arms. "What did you expect, Jake? You think I'm supposed to sit here night after night pretending everything's fine, while you barely even notice I exist?" My chest tightened. "What the hell are you talking about?" She let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "You were so wrapped up in your career, in your own little world, that you didn't even see me slipping away." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. She was twisting the knife, shifting blame, trying to rewrite reality so that her betrayal somehow became my fault. But I wouldn't let her warp the truth. "Don't try to justify this." I snapped, my voice shaking with barely contained fury. "This isn't about me, Emily. This is about you making the choice to cheat, to destroy our marriage. Don't you dare turn this around on me." She didn't answer right away. She just stared at me with those cold, calculating eyes, the same ones that had once been filled with warmth, with love. And then, with a smirk that sent fire through my veins, she said the words that would haunt me forever. "Maybe if you were more of a man, I wouldn't have had to go looking for one." The room tilted, my vision blurring as the sheer cruelty of her words slammed into me. She stood there, arms crossed, like she had won some twisted game, like she enjoyed watching me break. And in that moment, I realized just how far gone she was. Or maybe just how blind I had been all along. Her words echoed in my mind, each one carving deeper into the raw wound she had left behind. I was too stunned to react, too numb to do anything but let the weight of betrayal crush me whole. Emily stood there, gazing at me with a smug satisfaction that churned my stomach. An overwhelming urge to scream, to shatter something, to unleash the fury raging within me clawed at my insides. Yet, instead of giving in, I found myself stepping backward, unable to even meet her gaze. The woman I had married, the one I had once cherished beyond reason, was gone, replaced by someone unrecognizably cruel and heartless. "I don't even know who you are anymore." I finally managed, my voice barely above a whisper, fractured and weak. She let out another bitter laugh, the sound laced with venom. "Maybe that's the problem, Jake. Maybe you never knew who I really was. You just saw what you wanted to see." The walls seemed to close in around me, suffocating, crushing. Was she right? Had I been blind to the truth all along? Or was this just another manipulation, another twisted attempt to drive the dagger deeper into my heart? "I gave you everything," I murmured, my voice quivering under the weight of betrayal. "I gave you my love, my trust, my entire life. And this is how you repay me? By tearing it all apart. She shrugged, her expression devoid of remorse. Things change, Jake. People change. Maybe it's time you accepted that. The fury, the agony, the sheer injustice of it all burned to me like wildfire. I was teetering on the edge of something dark, something perilous. I wanted her to hurt, to feel even a fraction of the devastation she had inflicted upon me. But deep down, I knew nothing would fix this. Nothing would mend what she had shattered. So I did the only thing I could. I walked out, grabbing my keys. I strode toward the door, needing to escape before the poison in her words consumed me entirely. Max followed close behind, his concerned eyes searching mine, but I couldn't bring myself to acknowledge him. "Where do you think you're going?" she called after me, her voice laced with mockery. "Anywhere but here," I muttered, slamming the door behind me. I drove for hours, the city lights blurring into streaks as I tried to outrun the torment circling my mind. But no matter how far I went, the image of Emily wrapped in that man's arms, the sound of her cruel laughter, kept replaying, an inescapable nightmare. Eventually, I found myself parked on a quiet street, the engine humming softly in the stillness of the night. As I stared blankly ahead, the magnitude of what had happened finally began to sink in. The weight of it was unbearable. My marriage was over, obliterated by the one person I had trusted more than anyone in the world. There was no going back, no repairing what had been broken. But what did that mean for me? For our children? For the life we had built together? As I sat there, swallowed by the darkness, I realized I was at a crossroads. I could let this destroy me, let it drown me in resentment, or I could find a way to survive, to rebuild, even if I had to do it alone. When I finally returned home, the house was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. I wasn't sure if Emily had gone to bed, or if she had left entirely. A part of me wished she had, sparing me the agony of facing her again. But as I stepped inside, Max met me at the door, his tail wagging hesitantly, offering a small solace in the suffocating void. I didn't want to see her, didn't want to hear any more of her venomous words. But something within me compelled me upstairs. I needed to know where we stood. If anything was left to salvage. My heart pounded as I approached the bedroom, the door slightly ajar. I hesitated, drawing in a deep, shuddering breath before stepping inside. And then I saw it. Emily was lying in our bed, with him. The sight hit me like a freight train, stealing the breath from my lungs. They were tangled together, their bodies barely concealed by the sheets. His arm was draped possessively over her, as though he had any right to be there. I felt like I was suffocating. The walls blurred, the room spun, and my vision darkened as the full weight of her betrayal crashed down on me. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't a fleeting mistake. This was deliberate, calculated cruelty. She had brought him here, into our home, into the space we had shared for years, and desecrated it. My hands curled into fists, every muscle in my body screaming for retribution. But I was frozen. She must have sensed my presence because she stirred, her eyes fluttering open when she saw me standing there. Her expression didn't shift to guilt or remorse. No, instead it twisted into irritation, like I was the one intruding. "What the hell are you doing here?" she snapped, pulling the sheet closer around her as if that could shield her from the truth. I couldn't answer. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't find the words beneath the tidal wave of rage and heartbreak crushing me. Then he sat up, the man who had stolen everything from me, smirking as he glanced between us. "Looks like the party's over," he said, his voice thick with arrogance. Something inside me snapped. Before I knew what I was doing, I lunged at him, rage consuming me like wildfire. But he was faster, stronger. He dodged my attack, gripping my arm and twisting it behind my back with brutal force. Pain flared through me, but I struggled against him, fury overriding reason. He leaned in close, his voice a low, taunting whisper. "You're pathetic," he sneered, his breath hot against my skin. No wonder she came to me. Emily watched, her expression impassive. And then, in the final act of cruelty that shattered whatever was left of my heart, she laughed. A cold, merciless laugh that echoed through the room, slicing through me like a blade. She laughed as her new lover held me down, humiliating me, reducing me to nothing. When he finally let go, I crumpled to the floor, pain radiating through every inch of my body. I didn't even have the strength to look up to see the triumph in their eyes. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built my world around, had become a stranger, a monster who reveled in my suffering. This wasn't the end. But God help me, I wished it was.